The messed up truth of Vlad the Impaler, the real Dracula. It is estimated Vlad Dracula was born between 1428 to 1431, as the son of Vlad II, who was then Prince of Wallachia. Life was difficult during the 15th century and Vlad's was no exception. In 1442, he and his brother Radu were captured and held prisoner by Sultan Murad II, ruler of the Ottoman Empire at the time, as a means to ensure obedience from their father. The confinement lasted until the Hungarians invaded Wallachia 5 years later, slaughtering Vlad II and his eldest son. In an unforgiving battle, Vlad exited captivity with a heightened passion for vengeance. A hatred so strong it drove him to forgive and join forces with the Hungarians, as he took his rightful place on the Wallachian throne. In 1448, Vlad ruled Wallachia as viciously as a lion would rule the savannah. Crafting his utopian army, he impaled anyone that defied him, or demonstrated qualities he loathed such as thievery and dishonesty. Not only did he use impalement as a form of execution, but Vlad strategically let cadavers rot on permanent spear displays outside his fortress walls, to serve as a threat to his enemies and a precaution to anyone contemplating his betrayal. To build his castle, Vlad ordered the elite march 85 miles to the site of Ponary Castle, without adequate clothing, footwear, or provisions. Those who didn't die en route were forced to aid in the construction of the new fortress, after which they would be set free. Conveniently, they all died before completion in 1457. After Vlad's rise to power, Mehmed II took reign of the Ottoman Empire and led his army into Wallachia to take control of the capital city. But Vlad III had been warned of the attack and evacuated the city, leaving behind the impaled bodies of the Ottoman prisoners of war as a welcome gift for Mehmed II to feast his eyes on. As the siege continued, Vlad III launched a surprise raid on Mehmed I's army camp, commanding his men sport the dress of the Ottoman uniform. Encumbered by poor visibility under the cloak of night, and their groggy state, after the rude awakening, the Turks began slaughtering their own men in mass confusion. Mehmed II acknowledged defeat and retreated shortly afterwards, allowing Vlad III to continue rule of his domain. There are a few things that Vlad would never tolerate. One is lying, also thievery, and any kind of dishonesty. Here are a few stories where people regretted doing so. On St. Bartholomew's Day, sometime in August, in 1459, Dracula caused 30,000 of the merchants and nobles of the Transylvanian city of Brasov to be impaled. In order that he might better enjoy the results of his orders, the prince commanded that his table be set up and that his boyars join him for a feast amongst the forest of impaled corpses. While dining, Dracula noticed that one of his boyars was holding his nose in an effort to alleviate the terrible smell of clotting blood and emptied bowels. Dracula then ordered the sensitive nobleman impaled on a stake higher than all the rest so that he might be above the stench. Vlad's favorite was anal impalement. Here's how it worked. A smooth, thick pole with a narrowed, but blunt, top end would be embedded in the ground. If you think of a width you can barely get the fingers of both hands around, you're probably about right. The height of the pole is carefully adjusted, so the top is slightly higher than the victim's behind, when standing on tiptoes. The pole and the entry point are then smeared with fat or grease. The victim is held above the pole and placed down on it. If the width doesn't quite fit, that's not a problem. Simply use a knife to slit from the anus towards the genitals until we have a snug fit. Now the victim is lowered down until they can stand on their own feet on tiptoes. In an attempt to clean up the streets of the city of Trgovist, the capital of Wallachia, Vlad once invited all the sick, vagrants, and beggars over to one of his homes under the pretext of a feast. After they had eaten their fill, Vlad politely excused himself and had the entire court boarded up, then burned the whole building to the ground, while everybody was still inside. Vlad once had a mistress who lived in a house in the back streets of Targoviste. This woman apparently loved the prince to distraction, and was always anxious to please him. Vlad was often moody and depressed, and the woman made every effort to lighten her lover's burdens. Once, when Vlad was particularly depressed, the woman dared tell him a lie in an effort to cheer him up. She told him that she was pregnant. Vlad warned the woman not to joke about such matters, but she insisted on the truth of her claim, despite her knowledge of the prince's feelings about dishonesty. She messed up. Vlad had the woman examined by midwives to determine the truth of her claim. When informed that the woman was lying, Dracula drew his knife and cut her open from the groin to her breasts, while proclaiming his desire for the world to see where he had been. Vlad then left the woman to die in agony. Ambassadors of a foreign power visit Vlad's court at Targoviste. When granted an audience with the prince, the envoys refused to remove their hats, as was the custom when in the presence of the prince in Wallachia. Angered at this sign of disrespect, Vlad had the ambassadors' hats nailed to their heads, so that they might never remove them. Soon the Turks had enough. They gathered an army that tripled Vlad's, and invaded Transylvania. Vlad did everything he could to stop the invasion. He burnt crop fields and poisoned wells, even if it meant that his people would also suffer. Historians believe that Vlad was married twice in his lifetime. The identity of the first wife is unknown, but she gave birth to his eldest son and heir, Minat. His second wife was Justina Zilagy. She gave birth to his other two sons. Crossing the border into Romania, the Turks had to go through a real-life physical vision of hell. A forest of 20,000 dead and dying, wailing, impaled bodies blocked their path. Many Turkish soldiers turned back and fled, but the brave still carried on. After a bloody battle with the loss of more than half their men, Vlad was killed by being beheaded. As proof, his bloody, severed head was taken back to the Sultan, who raised him and Vlad's younger brother Radul, whom had stayed loyal to the Turkish army and become a general. Vlad's long and bloody reign had ended and peace filled Europe once again. It was first thought that Vlad's remains were buried in Snagov Monastery Church, but in 1931 explorers dug up this site, which according to Romanian legend he was buried in, but all they found were animal bones. In 1461, the original Comana Monastery was found and built by Vlad Tepes as a monastery fortress. During archaeological work performed in the 1970s, a headless body, which may be that of Vlad Tepes, was discovered on the grounds of the current monastery. Historian Constantin Razachevisi and others believe that he may have been buried here. There are many statues of Vlad all around Romania, and he is hailed as a hero. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to support the channel. Until the next one.